Professor Hildebrandt here with another video to help you guys with some of the math and graphs here in Chapter 5 for microeconomics. If you haven't yet, go back please and watch my first video on consumer and producer surplus. It's much more basic. I explained the concepts. Here I'm going to just jump right into some examples that are a little bit more advanced and to show you some of the things that you might be seeing in your assignments. So let's start. Here's our market schedule. So we have in our first column, the prices where the second column gives us what the quantity demanded would be by our consumers. And then the third column is the quantity supplied by our firms. And so suppose that we want to calculate consumer and producer surplus. So I do think for most of you, the easiest way to do this is going to be to draw your graph of the market. So that's what I'm going to do right here. All right, now we actually don't have to plot all 5 points. Okay, there's 3 pieces of information that are going to be key to calculating the value of consumer and producer surplus. One is equilibrium. So the price where quantity demanded and quantity supplied are equal. And then the second is we want to see what our y-intercepts are going to be. In other words, we need to know the starting point for our curves, okay? And so in this case, to be the y-intercept, it means that, so if we're going to show our y-intercept, it's going to be wherever quantity is 0. So we're looking for where quantity is 0. So for quantity supplied, it is 0 at a price of 5. Wonderful. So that tells me then that at the price of $5, that is the starting point. Okay, that's the starting point of my upward sloping supply curve. Again, the other points on this curve are irrelevant. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to look at my second column here for quantity demanded, and I find a quantity demanded of 0 occurs at a price of 25. So let me draw a few more things on here. We need equilibrium. So that price of, that was an awful 15, apologies. So the price of 15, and that is a quantity of 30. Okay, 30. And then lastly, we will have, sorry, I'm not the best at drawing straight on this. Okay, the price of 25, again, is where my quantity demanded is 0. So now hopefully, now that I have drawn this out for you guys, you can more clearly see where consumer and producer surplus is. But just in case, remember, consumer surplus starts at the equilibrium price, goes up to the demand curve. And so this pink triangle represents consumer surplus. For producer surplus, we start at the equilibrium price, we go down to the supply curve. And so this purple triangle is producer surplus. To do our math, remember, it's just the area of a triangle, which is 1/2 times the base times the height. So for consumer, it's 1/2 times the base here is 25 minus 15. Okay, and then the height is 30 minus 0. And I'm not gonna keep going with that. You should be able to work this out. You need to practice. If you want to follow up, make sure you got your answers right, please email me. You'll do the same thing then for consumer surplus. So it would be 1/2 times $15 minus 5. And then once again, the 30 minus 0. Okay, so to recap, if you have a market schedule, which is what this chart of information is, then I suggest you draw the graph needing 3 points of information, okay? We need to know where equilibrium is. We need to know the y-intercepts. So if quantity supplied is 0, what's price? If quantity demanded is 0, what's the price? Okay, moving on to my next example. Okay, so here's our second example. This time we're going to use linear equations. We have demand is represented by P equals 26 minus 2Q, and then supply is P equals 4Q minus 2. And once again, we're going to be asked to find consumer and producer surplus. So I'm going to, again, say, let's draw it out. Quantity and price. All right, well, the problem here, though, is we need to know equilibrium. So this takes us back to Unit 1, where we used our linear equations to find equilibrium, price, and quantity. Remember, we defined equilibrium as the price where quantity demanded and quantity supplied are the same. So we're going to take all of this P equals part for supply and pop it in for the P in demand. So I'll have 4Q plus 2 equals 26 minus 2Q. I'm going to add those Q's to both sides, so I get 6Q, and then subtract the 2. 26 minus 2 is 24. So my equilibrium quantity is simply 4. And then I'll plug into either of those equations to get my price. So I'll just do supply. So P equals 4 times Q, so which is 4, plus 2, so 16 plus 2, equilibrium price is $18. Okay, so that's one of the 3 points that I need, but there's 2 more. So let me erase these because we're going to have to move on to another page in a minute. So I also need to know, though, my y-intercepts. Where do the supply and demand curves hit this? Okay, sorry, all my daughter's sitting here with me. Where do they hit the y-axis, okay? And remember, that happens when quantity equals 0. So wherever quantity is 0, at that price is where we'll be on the y-intercept. So let's start with demand. So we're looking for the price, 26 minus 2Q, so where Q is 0. So 26 minus 2 is simply 24. So 24 is where, so 24 is the price where our downward sloping demand curve is going to start. Okay, so we'll do the same thing then for supply. So supply is represented by P equals 4 times Q, again, Q being 0 plus 2. So we have 0 plus 2, or a beginning price of $2. So here I am, $2, upward sloping supply curve. And where the 2 meet, we already know the answers here. This is our equilibrium. And so my equilibrium quantity, remember, was 4, and my equilibrium price was 18. Okay, plot those in. So now, once again, we start at equilibrium price, we go up to the demand curve, and this dark blue triangle represents consumer surplus. So again, you just do your 1/2 base times height, okay? And then this, I'll do, I don't know, pink. So we'll, again, start at equilibrium price, go down to the supply curve. So this pink triangle represents our producer surplus. Okay, the last thing that I'll talk about really quickly here is what if you're given a price control, either a price ceiling or a price floor, and asked, how that impacts the market. Okay, so let's say the government comes in and sets a price ceiling here, so PC, at a price of $10. Okay, you cannot charge a price higher than the ceiling, so now everything above $10 is an illegal price, okay? That means our equilibrium can no longer be the price because it's illegal. All right, well, to determine what this does, we need to compare quantity demanded at that price to quantity supplied. Well, how do we get those? With our linear equations. So you simply take this new price of 10, you substitute in for your P, solve for quantity demanded, and then in your second equation, you substitute in for the P, solve for quantity supplied. Okay, and then you should also be able to compare and look and see what happens to producer and consumer surplus when we have these price controls. All right, I hope this helps, but if you guys have any additional questions, please reach out to me.